Every piece of gear you own will let you down at some point. Doesn't matter what you paid or how well it was reviewed. And if there's one thing I've learned over the last 35 years of hiking, it's the fact that the thing that gets you through a trip isn't better gear. It's knowing what to do when the gear quits on you. So in this video, I'm going to show you 7 times my kit has failed on me out in the wilds of Tasmania and the simple habit I walked away with each time. The thing nobody tells you about gear. Okay, so here's the thing about gear. We treat it like a promise. You spend the money, you read the reviews, you tell yourself, this bit of kit looks good, it's going to hold up well. And then you're 3 days in, it's raining, and the thing you trusted most is the thing that lets you down. Gear is a tool. It's not a guarantee. And after a lot of years out there, I've stopped being surprised when something breaks, and I've started paying attention to what each failure was trying to teach me. Now, let me start with the one I've seen more than any other. When the soles come off your boots. The classic gear failure, the one I've seen go wrong more than anything else, is a boot sole coming off. And it almost never happens to the boots that you wear all the time. It happens to the ones that you've had sitting in the back of the cupboard. And I've seen this happen a lot over the years, mostly back when I was working as a guide. You'd be on day 2 or 3 of Tasmania's overland track and someone's sole would just start peeling away from their boot. And sometimes the whole thing would just fall off. Now, there's a sort of breakdown which is called hydrolysis that happens when boots sit unused for a long time. The glue dries out, it goes brittle is probably a better word, and the sole just says, I've had enough. Then the first hard day out on the track, it just lets go. And we'd end up preparing someone's boots most nights to get them through. Every day, at the end of each day, we would have to fix their boot again or try and come up with some sort of quasi replacement. So these days, here's what I would do about that. If you've got boots that haven't been on your feet in a year or 2, maybe they've been longer, don't trust them on a big trip. Wear them first, properly, on a few decent walks, and check the soles for cracking before you commit. And do carry some sort of fix or have something in your head about how you would fix a boot for when you're out in the track. Now, I used to carry a tube of free sole, which is like a boot glue, which is great if you've got a hut to sit in overnight while it sets. But out in the open, we'd make do with strong sort of duct tape and a bit of cord wrapped around the toe, around the boot to hold it together till camp. It's ugly, but it kind of works. Now, that one's a slow failure, and you usually get some warning. The next one gave me no warning at all, and it happened at 3 in the morning. The holes that appear at 3 a.m. So you go to sleep with a perfectly good tent, and you wake up at 3 in the morning to a hole in the side of it. Maybe there's a bit of water running in too, just to add a bit of flavour to it. Now, this has happened to me twice in 35 years, and both times, would you believe it, it was a brand new tent, first trip for that tent. The first time was the South Coast track here back in 1997. Brand new Macpac Olympus at the time. Now, we'd had some food sitting against the side wall of the tent overnight, and we woke up to a couple of big holes chewed straight through the fabric. Possums. And they could smell the food through the wall, and they just went through it to get to it. Now, I told myself, never again. And I was good for years, sort of. And then in 2011, on the Western Arthur Range, a brand new tent again, and I got tired and lazy one night, chucked a jacket with some snacks still in the pocket against the side of the tent, woke up to a little rodent of some kind chewing its way into the side of my tent. Same mistake, 14 years apart. It's such a bugger. So annoying. So the rule I live by now is dead simple. Food never goes against the walls of your tent. In Australia, we don't have to worry about bears and stuff, but we do have to worry about things like possums chewing holes in your tents. So yeah, food never goes along the walls. If there's 2 of you, it sits in the middle between you. If you're on your own, then keep it as far off the sides as you can. Middle of the tent or as close to it as you can get. And I haven't had a hole in my tent ever since. For the same reason, I don't leave food in my backpack either. Worst case, I would hang it in a tree or something. Now, not every 3 in the morning wake up is a possum. Most of the time you're just up for the usual reasons, and that's when a couple of small little things can make the whole night a whole lot easier. And that is an inflated mat under you and a bit of light when you need it, which is exactly what the sponsor of this video, Outzac, has been sorting out. Now, I always have a little lantern hanging up inside my tent. I've been doing it for years, taking a little lantern on trips with me. So when I do wake up at some ungodly hour, I can just reach up, turn it on, and the whole tent is lit up. The other thing I love is a well-inflated sleeping pad that I didn't have to use up my lungs for to blow up myself. And I've been taking a little pump for years as well to inflate my mat and my pillow when I get to camp. And lately I've been running Outzac's little Pico pump for the last 6 months or so to inflate my mat when I arrive at camp. And now Outzac are bringing out something that folds these two jobs, the lighting and the inflating, into one thing. And it's called the beam pump. And that is this thing here. It's got a 300 lumen lantern with a 5 kilopascal pump built into it. And you genuinely never know. It just looks like a lantern. Pretty much looks very similar to a lantern I already carry. Weighs about the same, and you can't tell it's a pump until you go to use it. So on a cold night, you can light the whole tent up after inflating your mat without digging out a second bit of gear. And like I said, I take my lantern on pretty much every trip anyway, especially through the dark Tassie winters, and I usually carry a pump too. So for me, this just becomes the one thing, and it's a bit more compact with it. And the thing I like about the Outzac pumps is the inflation pressure they get is probably better than any pump I've ever used before. Normally with other pumps I've used, you've got to give it a few breaths into your sleeping pad after you've used the pump, but with theirs, you just don't. It gives it enough pressure just from the pump. It gets that right sort of pressure that you want without having to gasp a few last breaths into the pad, which is really nice. This thing's only 78 grams. It's a touch lighter than my old lantern and pump put together. It's rechargeable. It's got this little loop to hang it in your tent, and mine hasn't run flat on me yet. To use it, you just double press the switch that you want, light or pump. It's dead simple. It comes with the inflation attachments as well for just about any sleeping pad that you can find. It's got a little charging cord and a little bag to pop it in as well. Now, mine's still a 3D printed prototype, but it's going live shortly, and the link is in the description below. I'm loving this thing. I'm loving the inflation. I'm loving the light. And thanks to Outzac for sponsoring the video and supporting more videos like this. Right, back to it. This next failure cost me my favourite stove. The stove I melted. A good stove failure is a special kind of annoying because you usually do it yourself. I destroyed mine a couple of years ago and it was completely avoidable. Now, I'd been using my little jet boil for years. I loved it. It was sort of my go-to for ages, especially for group trips. Then I bought one of those little skillet fry pan things to go with it, thinking I could do a few fancier meals out there for the kids and that type of thing. And I just took it out of the box, chucked it in my backpack, and took it straight out on a trip without ever testing it at home. Then, the first time I went to use it, I put the skillet on, and the whole plastic part of the stove melted and just ruined itself. Cooked the stove for dinner instead of actual dinner. And to be fair to Jetboil, that one was completely my fault, not the stoves. I've never been able to use it since, and I know I'm not the only one that this has happened to. I should have read the instructions. I do need to go and buy another one because I did love that stove. Now, the lesson here is one I should have already known. Test new gear at home before it goes on a trip, especially anything where two bits of kit have to work together. A new pot, a new pan, a new attachment, boil a pot of water out in the backyard, set it up on the lawn, find out it doesn't work when you're standing next to your kitchen, not when you're 4 days in and relying on it for every meal. That was a comfort thing. We had another stove, someone else in the group could cook for us. That was fine. Or I could have eaten it cold. But the next failure was the kind where you actually need the gear to work, and it was sitting in the scrub a few hours behind me. The poles that fell out in the scrub. So here's a fun one. Arriving at camp at the end of a big day in remote southwest Tasmania and realising your tent poles are gone. Not broken, not can't find them, gone. Fallen out of your pack somewhere back down on the track. Now, this was the Eastern Arthurs here in Tasmania in around the year 2000. We'd had a big climb up to Stewart Saddle from Pass Creek, beautiful day, and we got to camp, and well, the poles just weren't there. They'd somehow worked their way out of the side of the pack somewhere on the climb. Now, my mate walked back to look for them. He was gone for a couple of hours at least and got back right on dark with nothing. So we had no poles and a tent to put up. I spent the time that he was searching, rigging the fly and the inner with a bunch of cord and string, tying it off on rocks and scrub, and I got it standing well enough for us to do the night. We got lucky with the weather. If it had really blown, I'm not sure it would have held. I reckon it might have, but if it had rained, I don't want to think about what that would have been like. But anyway, we found the poles the next day, stuck in a bit of scrub, hours back down the track. So I got two things out of that. One, nothing important goes on the outside of the pack in thick scrub. The bush will take it off you. Poles, anything strapped on, it goes inside or it gets swallowed by the bush. Two, and this is the bigger one, I guess, is that you can put a tent up without poles if you've got a bit of cord and you're willing to think about it. The shelter still works if you can come up with a bit of compromise. Now, so far, these are all issues that probably could have been prevented. This next one, I couldn't, and it taught me the most about what to actually carry. When my pack just gave up on me. Sometimes the gear that fails is the gear holding everything else. I had a pack completely let go of me on day one of a trip once with 5 days still to walk. And there's a lot more frustrating than when that happens. Now this was, again, it was the early 2000s and I was guiding on Tasmania's overland track. And we had 6 days, carrying a guide's load, which is a fair bit. I had a MacPack Cascade, which back then was the pack to have. And they'd brought out a new harness system with a metal frame thing around the lower back to throw the weight onto your hips more. And day one, that metal piece of the frame just tore straight through the harness fabric so that the thing that was carrying all the weight on my hips just failed and the pack started sagging and pulling all wrong. Now, I spent a fair while trying to fix it properly and I couldn't, but I had a little repair kit with me. So that night I got a needle and thread and bits and pieces and I sewed it up, sewed up sort of a sleeve to hold it together and contain the frame so I could at least carry it. And it got me through the next 5 days. Now, 2 things stuck with me there. The first is that without that little repair kit, I reckon that trip was over on day one. It would have been awful. A needle, some strong thread, a few metres of cord was what turned that dead pack into a pack that finished the walk. The second thing, well, I rang MacPack when I returned. I might have sent them a letter in the mail or email. Maybe it was email then. Maybe it was email. Anyway, they just sent me a new one, a new pack, and just sent it, which was really very nice. And I've still got that same pack 25 years later, and it's never missed a beat. The gear that fails you isn't always the brand that fails you. How the company handles it, well, that tells you a lot. Now, the next failure is the exact reason I added one specific thing to my kit and have never taken it out since. The pole that snapped in the wind. Tent poles can break. Not lost this time, but actually snapped. And it usually happens on the night you least want to be outside fiddling with a tent. Now, this was a South Coast track again near the end of a 26-day trip. It was on like the second last night. So we were a long way in and pretty tired. We copped some really heavy wind one night and one of the aluminium poles on my tent just snapped. We only had a night or two to go, so we splintered it up with tape and got the tent limping through, but it barely held. And in that wind, it was sketchy. So ever since, I carry a pole repair sleeve. It's a little metal tube, weighs basically nothing, and you slide it over a broken or bent pole and tape it up, and you're back in business in 2 minutes. That's it. If you do any walking in exposed country where the wind really gets up, and in Tasmania it really gets up, you want one of these in your pack. It's one of the cheapest, lightest bits of insurance you'll ever carry. Then there's one small thing that fails all the time. Costs about $2 to fix, and most people don't carry that fix. The $2 part that ruins your day. Well, this is a little one, but a snapped hip belt buckle on your pack can wreck, well, your whole hiking experience. It's a tiny bit of plastic, but when it goes, the load goes with it. I've had a hip belt buckle snap on me a couple of times, and one of those was a week out on a hike. When it went, I ended up pinching the buckle off the sternum strap to keep the hip belt sort of done up. We ended up finding a bigger buckle off someone else's pack somewhere and fixed it that way. And it worked, but it wasn't very comfortable. I was making do with this smaller sort of buckle. It just didn't carry properly for the rest of the trip. So what I do now is I carry a spare plastic little hip belt buckle. Costs a couple of dollars, weighs nothing, and it lives in my repair kit. If a buckle goes, I swap it and move on instead of butchering the rest of the pack to limp home. What every one of these had in common. So that's 7, and when I line them all up, there's a pattern, and it's not buy better gear. Some of this stuff was the best money could buy at the time, and it failed anyway. What actually got me through every time was 2 things. A bit of hard-won skill, being willing to think your way around a problem instead of panicking, and a small repair kit. Not a big heavy one, a needle, a strong thread, a few metres of cord, some good tape, a pole sleeve, a spare hip buckle, and maybe a bit of glue. That little bag saved more of my trips than any single expensive bit of gear ever has. And that's really the whole thing. You can't stop your gear failing. You can only decide whether a failure ends your trip or just becomes a story you tell later. And I'd love to know your stories too. So if you've had a bit of gear pick the worst possible moment to die on you, then tell us about it in the comments down below. The thing is though, once you start thinking in this way, the bigger question isn't what to do when gear fails, it's actually what's worth carrying in the first place. Well, after 35 years, I've stripped it right back to a handful of things that earn their place. So go and watch this video up here next, where I break down the kit that made the cut.